Great, we're live. Welcome everyone to our STEP Housing Roundtable live stream. This is the first of two roundtables where we are going to be diving into the specific policy priorities of our statewide legislative campaign, Growing Together. I have with me today two Futurewise land use experts that are going to be walking us through some of the specifics of the bill and the background of what we're working on, specifically around HB 2266 or our STEP housing bill. But first, would love to do some intros. I'm Marcella. I am the state organizer with Futurewise. This is my fourth session with Futurewise. And my job is just building the support and the momentum that we need to get these bills over the finish line. And I will pass it over to Alex. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Brennan, the executive director here at Futurewise. And, in that role, I get to touch on kind of all different aspects of our work and have seen ways that barriers to STEP housing have been a challenge across the state. So excited to talk about it today.
And good afternoon. I'm Tim Trohimovich. I'm the Director of Planning and Law at Futurewise, and this is my over 20th legislative session.
That's a fun brag, Tim. But let's start from the very beginning. So for people that are either new with Futurewise or new to land use, Alex, can you tell us a little bit about the Growth Management Act, like what it is and what's our relationship to it?
Sure. So yeah, this is, I think, important context as we then zoom into some very specific issues. The Growth Management Act is a statewide planning framework for how our communities should grow, where we are going to see new housing, jobs, how we're going to coordinate our infrastructure and services with that growth, and how we're going to protect our natural resources, our open spaces, our ecosystems and habitat as we grow. There was a kind of groundswell of advocacy for having some kind of framework like this in the late 80s as Washington State was starting to grow quickly after a period of kind of economic recession in the 70s. And a lot of people were looking to a similar framework that Oregon already had. Those advocates created pressure that brought this issue to the state legislature. And in 1990, the kind of first phase of the Growth Management Act, essentially this framework that gives direction to cities and counties on how they should be growing and how they should plan for that growth, was put in place. And then the following year, there was kind of a second phase of the Growth Management Act, which was an accountability structure around these new requirements. How are we actually going to hold local jurisdictions accountable? And through that process, Futurewise was created both as a kind of steward of the goals of the Growth Management Act. These people who'd been advocating for these better planning for growth, a different way of growing that was focusing more on adding into existing communities rather than sprawling outward. Created Futurewise to kind of steward those goals, to steward the act, to be part of the accountability mechanism by bringing appeals, by doing advocacy at the local level, and then also to be technical assistance for local jurisdictions, because this was a new thing and a lot of places needed help and support on how to do it right. So that was kind of our founding. I think particularly relevant to the conversation today, one of the sections of a comprehensive plan that's required by the Growth Management Act is a housing element. And that's where you plan for housing, think about your housing needs and kind of what you need to do to meet those needs. The original housing element requirements were very sort of general and didn't give a lot of specific direction. And that increasingly, as our state was growing a lot, as housing was getting more expensive, as a lot of people were having trouble accessing housing, that became a problem that we didn't have more specific ways to direct cities and counties to provide for that housing or to plan for and accommodate that housing. And so in 2021, we focused a lot of our advocacy on a bill, HB 1220, that we'll be talking a fair amount about today, that really created a much more detailed and specific and enforceable framework for how local jurisdictions should plan for housing.
Awesome. Thanks for that background, Alex. But before we dive into specific legislation, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about some of the words that we're using, especially with land use. They can get pretty wonky. So Tim, can you walk us through some specific definitions that would be helpful for folks following along?
Sure. As Alex mentioned, a comprehensive plan is a set of policies and maps where a community determines how it wants to grow in the future, where it wants to grow, and in what kinds of uses are going to happen where. So it's a broad policy framework for the physical development of a city or a county. The comprehensive plan is implemented in a variety of ways. One of the ways it's implemented is through zoning. Zoning is a type of development regulation where a community is divided up into different areas, zones, as you will. That's why it's called zoning. And various uses and development intensities are allowed in these various zones. You can have residential zones that are almost exclusively residential. You can have mixed use zones where you have a mix of offices and commercial and residential development. Think of downtown Walla Walla and the streets there where you've got multi-story buildings, you've got an office or a gallery or a store or a restaurant or a bar on the first floor, and then you've got residences above it. That's classic mixed-use zones. There are also industrial zones where heavy manufacturing and warehousing and similar kinds of uses take place. And so that's one of the way our comprehensive plans are implemented. And it's also where cities and counties decide what uses are going to be allowed where and under what intensities. And of course, we're talking about step housing today, right? And step housing is actually, I try not to use it because I can never remember what it stands for. So I always like to say that it's 4 different housing types. It's permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, indoor emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelters. And these are just different kind of places where people live. Some of us need help in finding places to live, in being able to live there effectively. And so these different housing types help us or help people do that.
Awesome. Thanks for that background, Tim. So now let's talk about some of the specific legislation. So our Growing Together campaign this year, overall, we're focused on building more types of housing in all neighborhoods and protecting farms from sprawl. And HB 2266, which is the step housing bill, this is just like a next housing bill in a long line of work that we've passed over the past few years. And I know Alex mentioned HB 1220, but it's helpful to know more about it to understand why this bill, 2266, this year is so important. And some of y'all watching may even remember doing some work on 1220. But Tim, could you give an overview of 1220 and what it does?
Sure. As Alex said, it provides more specifics for how counties and cities plan for housing. It requires all counties and cities to do an inventory of their existing housing types, to inventory and analyze their housing needs, to determine the incomes in the community and what housing is affordable to what income groups. It requires the county to plan for and then actually zone for housing for all of those income groups. And so, for example, in most of Washington state, if you're going to build housing that's affordable to people who are earning between 50 and 0% of your county median income, you're going to need particular housing types. You're going to need 2 and 3 and 4-story wood frame structures, because those are the structures that are efficient to build, they're economic to build, and with the appropriate level of subsidies, it's affordable to that income group. And so counties and cities look at the existing and planned population, what their incomes are likely to be, and plan sufficient areas for those various housing types. So if you're earning 120% of the county median income, in most places, a single family home is affordable. So you make sure you have enough land for single family homes. Lower incomes require townhomes and condominiums and duplexes and threeplexes. So you make sure you have enough land for those as well. And then you zone for it to make sure that people can actually build it. The Growth Management Act also requires programs to help fund affordable housing. So it's not just, do we have enough land for it? What are we going to do to make sure that these developments can be built at these different affordability levels? The Growth Management Act in, excuse me, in 1220 also requires addressing displacement. One of the potential adverse developments of or effects of redevelopment and development is displacing people. And so local governments are required to take steps to prevent displacement, to put together programs and plans so that people aren't displaced from their neighborhoods of choices. There are other requirements as well, but I think those are probably some of the really key ones.
Sweet. So 1220 is huge. Did a lot, is doing a lot to like serve all Washingtonians at all income levels across the state. However, we are seeing some barriers to fully implementing this bill. And that's what takes us to HB 2266 this year, which is our top priority. Alex, can you walk us through what 2266 does?
Yeah, and to do that, I also want to add one other piece of context for HB 1220, which was at the time that the bill passed in early 2021, even then planning for step housing. I don't think we had that acronym yet at the time, but what we were thinking of as permanent supportive housing and different types of shelter and emergency housing was the most controversial part of the bill. And a lot of the negotiations in the legislature that year were about to what extent could local jurisdictions restrict those types of housing, put up barriers to those types of housing, and how were they going to be given allocations, need allocations for those types of housing. And so there were both some specific limitations on limitations that local governments could put in place for step housing at the time, but there were also some concessions and sort of places where additional flexibility was given to local governments as part of the negotiations that got the bill to pass. So fast forward now for 5 years, gosh, 5 years, we're seeing how this is playing out. And I think, one of the things that we're seeing is that there are still a lot of barriers to that make it harder to build step housing, more expensive, make it take longer, create more uncertainty for building step housing than for other types of housing. And that we have kind of inconsistency across a lot of different jurisdictions in how the providers, and these are generally kind of nonprofit, mission-driven organizations that are providing these types of housing, they are facing kind of a lot of uncertainty and different regulatory requirements and a lot of additional expenses and delay. And so the purpose of HB 2266 is to remove a lot of those barriers, a lot of those delays, those additional costs, to create more consistency and certainty for providers, so that we can build more of this housing and build it quickly. And and these are the housing types that are going to bring people who are currently sleeping, in doorways, in tents, in parks, and things like that. Provide them a supportive place where they can come inside and have, begin to get on a path to getting into a better situation and more stability. And so being able to scale and quickly roll out more of these housing types is really important for addressing homelessness across the state. And so that so again, the core piece of 2266 is that it prevents a lot of those barriers and delays and additional costs from being imposed by local governments.
Great. Thanks for sharing that background, Alex. So this bill, 2266, this is a really big deal too, if we're going to be serving every Washingtonian in our state. And it's not enough to just talk about this bill. If we are going to get it over the finish line, we need help. We need everyone that's watching, all of your friends and family, to take action to make sure that our leaders in Olympia know how critical this bill is and know that we are counting on them to be housing heroes. So this bill currently, it is in the House Committee on Housing. Earlier this week, over 1,000 people signed in pro on this bill, which is huge. Shout out to everyone that did. But our work is not done. This is just truly the very beginning. HB 2266 is scheduled for a vote in this committee next Tuesday, January 27th. And we need to make it clear that we need yes votes on this bill, that we need to be serving everyone in Washington. So I am going to drop a link in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, you should be able to get the link. If you're on Instagram, we can put the link in our bio later. But click that link and it will take you to an action to email the members of the House Housing Committee, urging them to vote yes. So do that right now. Click that link, fill it out, send it to your friends and family. And then from there, we will keep sending out updates on this bill in our Sunday newsletter. We'll have quick actions and updates on where this bill is at and next steps. But from there, that's all we got for y'all. We're going to be tuning in next Wednesday at 2 p.m. for our next roundtable to talk more about our work encouraging more middle housing. But yeah, click that link, take action, follow up with our Sunday email, and thanks for tuning in. And thank you so much, Alex and Tim, for being here and sharing your expertise with all of us. That's all we got, folks.